When the Northwest government embarked on a process to verify its workforce, little did they know it would reveal a plethora of ghost employees in the province. 37,000 people are improperly employed and they are part of the payroll system. Public salaries in the Northwest amounts to 19 billion rand per annum, which is the biggest part of the total provincial budget of 26 billion rand. Just 3 billion rand has been channeled toward service delivery. It's unclear how much money has been paid to ghost workers. To discuss this further, we now welcome in studio Gauteng Coordinator for the Right to Know campaign, Dr. Dale McKinley. Dale, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Gail, how do we deal with the issue of wasteful expenditure in government?
Well, it's a question that I think has been facing us for quite some time. If listeners remember, back in the late 1990s, several thousand ghost teachers were uncovered in the Eastern Cape. 3 years ago in Limpopo, 30,000 ghost health workers were uncovered. So it's not the first time that this has happened. And I think, unfortunately, the solutions to the crisis haven't been really up to par. Basically, what's happened is they brought in consultants, they've new payroll systems, new identification systems, and these don't seem to have really done the job. I think really what the issue is, it's the people that are overseeing and administering the payroll system. In other words, the bureaucrats themselves. And I think what we need to do is have proper oversight and management within those departments and discipline for those that have been found to flout the law and breaking the law. This is simply not happening.
Now, Dale, would you say the bureaucracy within government is what's causing this? Because there is a lot of red tape. There's so many people dealing with one thing that you don't really have a line to channel to. What's your take on that?
I think that that's part of the problem, but I think fundamentally we elect politicians to oversee the bureaucrats, and it's the politicians' job to take responsibility. So just last week we were told that there was 6 billion rand in unexplained expenditure in our own province. Now, the politicians need to be taking responsibility. Dave McKinley, our premier, has taken responsibility for that, but someone's heads need to roll. So it's about overseeing those bureaucrats and making them do their job. The bureaucrats themselves oftentimes are not the ones that take that responsibility.
Now, you mentioned systems that can be put in place in terms of new payroll systems, but what systems exactly do you as Right to Know think would be effective in terms of making sure that things like this doesn't happen with ghost workers cropping up from nowhere?
Well, I think the first thing is a proper identification system. We've talked about biometrics, others which has some problems to it, but this is not difficult. In other words, making sure that on a regular basis, every so often, every few months, not every 5 or 6 years, that you check your payroll system, that you check and you weed out those names that shouldn't be on there, those that have been dismissed or otherwise have retired. And this has to happen on a consistent, regular basis. And this needs to then be checked by the chief financial officers. Unfortunately, in many municipalities and provinces, we don't have registered chief financial officers and finance management systems in place. And I think this is where it falls down. So we need the proper people in the proper places and regular identification checks and management systems put on and done on a systematic basis.
Now, as Right to Know, how has your mandate, taken you further in terms of dealing with situations like these?
Well, I think, basically what our campaign is about transparency and about access to information. And in this case, if we knew about these things, and I think if government had been more forthcoming, we wouldn't get into a situation where several years later, 36,000 ghost workers appear. And I think it's also a question of the governments taking the public into their confidence and saying, look, we've got these problems. How can we live in a democracy. So if Parliament, if provincial parliaments, if municipalities are having problems, they can bring in expertise. People can help with those things. They're not on their own, and they don't have to take responsibility all the time on their own. And I think that's also something that we would encourage.
Dale, now in terms of this specific issue, investigations are still underway, and they're trying to figure out how it went wrong. And there's probably going to be a task team. Do you think a task team is just more wastage of money?
I do, in most cases. Yeah. Obviously, in some cases it might be called for, but we've had, I call ourselves the investigation nation. We have investigation after investigation, and literally we don't see too many people actually paying the price for those investigations. In other words, heads are rolling and people being held to account. What I think we need to do is people need to do their job. It's as simple as that. We need to put the right people in the right places. So unfortunately we have a problem in many cases, and the Northwest ANC, as the ruling party, has admitted this, that in political deployments into positions where people need to be qualified and need to be put in, irrespective of what their ideological bearings are, is something of a problem, I think. So it's a question not only just of capacity, it's a question of competency as well.
Now, Dale, just before we wrap up, you mentioned consultants earlier, and I mean, the issue of consultants costing government millions is something that constantly makes big news. What's your take on that? Do you think we should just eradicate them completely?
No, I don't think. I think there's certainly, obviously, some certain consultants that are needed. But what I think has happened into the state is that consultants have become the default choice when people don't do their job. So we have an entire department of finance. And then when the audit comes, they hire outside and outsourced auditors to do the job. And that costs taxpayers millions and millions of rands. So I think what the public really wants and what the Right to Know wants is get the right people in the right jobs, do their jobs. If they don't do them, get rid of them and put people in who can.
Dale, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on PM News.
Thank you.